The heavy oak door creaked softly as Anne Marwood pressed herself against the cold stone wall of the Tudor palace corridor. The flickering glow of candle sconces cast long, wavering shadows, throwing the ancient tapestries into ghostly relief. Her breath was shallow, every inch of her taut with tension as muffled voices drifted from the chamber ahead. She clutched the dagger concealed beneath the folds of her gown, the cool metal a stark reminder of the peril she bore. Anna's heart hammered in her chest, each beat echoing the danger that lurked in the shadows of Elizabeth's court. She had arrived with a secret burden, a blade meant for the Queen's throat, and now that secret had led her here to the edge of discovery and beyond. The distant whisper of plotting nobles confirmed worst fears. Lord Edmund Grey's network of conspirators was active, their ambitions threatening to unravel the fragile peace that held the realm together. Peering cautiously from behind a heavy tapestry, Anna's sharp eyes caught glimpses of familiar faces, men and women cloaked in the pretense of loyalty, but whose true allegiance was sworn to treachery. Lord Grey himself stood at the center, tall and commanding, his cold grey eyes scanning the small circle with an air of unyielding authority. Nearby, Lady Cecily Howard's calculating gaze flicked between the conspirators, her poised elegance a mask for the dangerous intrigue she wove. The words they exchanged were hushed but laced with menace. Plans to destabilize the Queen's reign were laid bare, whispers of assassination, alliances with foreign powers, and the pivotal role of the hidden dagger. Anne's stomach clenched as the full weight of her secret pressed down upon her. The blade she guarded was no mere trinket. It was the linchpin of a plot that could shatter the Tudor dynasty. Fear gripped her, yet beneath it burned a fierce determination. The loyalty that had brought her to court demanded action. She could not stand by as the crown teetered on the edge of ruin. But how to intervene without revealing her own hand? The labyrinth of court politics was fraught with peril, and one misstep could mean death not just for her, but for the Queen she revered. As the conspirators dispersed into the night, Anne slipped silently back into the shadows. The chill of the courtyard air wrapped around her like a shroud, the distant hoot of an owl a solemn companion to her solitary vigil. The dagger's weight at her side was a constant reminder of the stakes, a burden she must bear alone. Returning to her chambers, Anne lit a single candle and unfurled the scraps of information she had gathered. Rumors, whispered confidences, and glimpses of court gossip formed a fragile tapestry of truth. Her mind raced, piecing together clues, weighing loyalties, and plotting her next move. Every flicker of flame cast long shadows, mirroring the darkness that threatened to engulf the realm. She knew the path ahead was fraught with danger, but retreat was not an option. The web of intrigue tightened around the Queen, and only Anne's courage and cunning stood between the blade and Elizabeth's life. With a steadying breath, she steeled herself for the trials to come, the silent promise of loyalty shining like a beacon in the encroaching gloom. Outside, the court continued its dance of masks and whispers, oblivious to the storm gathering beneath its polished surface. But Anne Marwood was no longer a mere observer. She was a player in the deadly game, her every choice rippling through the fragile balance of power. And as the shadows lengthened, one truth remained clear: the dagger's shadow loomed large, and the fate of a kingdom hung in the balance. The night deepened, and with it, Anne's resolve. The web had tightened, there was no turning back now. The quiet rustle of silk skirts and the faint clink of metal echoed softly through the narrow corridors of Whitehall Palace as Anne Marwood made her way towards the secluded chamber behind the Queen's private apartments. Her heart thrummed with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. The dagger she had hidden close to her person weighed heavily, not just in her satchel, but in her soul. The moment had come to share her burden, to step beyond the lonely vigil she had kept and seek allies in the treacherous game unfolding around Elizabeth's throne. Inside the chamber, Lady Margaret Seymour stood near a window, her silver-streaked hair catching the last glow of the setting sun. Her piercing eyes, sharp as ever despite the years she had spent navigating Tudor court intrigues, softened slightly as Anne entered. Beside her, Sir Thomas Wycliffe leaned against the wooden table, his broad shoulders filling the space with quiet strength. His rough hands, calloused from years of swordsmanship, rested lightly on a stack of parchment maps and intercepted letters. Anne swallowed hard, her fingers clutching the folds of her gown as she stepped forward. "I have something to tell you both," she began, voice barely above a whisper. "A secret I have carried since my arrival, one that could endanger the Queen and all who serve her." Lady Margaret's gaze sharpened, and Sir Thomas straightened, his expression shifting from wary to alert. "Speak plainly, Anne," Lady Margaret urged, folding her hands calmly. Taking a deep breath, Anne revealed the truth. The dagger she concealed, meant for the Queen's harm, a symbol of the deadly conspiracy tightening its grip on the court. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the flickering of candlelight casting dancing shadows on the panelled walls. "You have done well to keep this hidden," Lady Margaret finally said, her voice low but firm. "But you cannot bear this alone. We must act, and quickly." Sir Thomas nodded, his blue eyes steady. "I swear my sword and loyalty to you and the Queen. Together, we can uncover those behind this plot and stop them before it's too late." The three leaned over the table, spreading out the intercepted letters and cryptic notes that had found their way into the Queen's household. The coded message from Lord Grey's faction lay open, a tangled web of words hinting at alliances with foreign powers and plans to strike at the heart of Elizabeth's reign. Their fingers traced the inked script, minds racing to decipher its meaning. Anne's youthful inexperience was tempered by Lady Margaret's wisdom and Sir Thomas's practical courage. Each brought strengths to the fragile alliance: Anne's keen intuition, Margaret's political savvy, and Thomas's readiness to act. Yet beneath the surface, personal tensions simmered. The unspoken romance between Sir Thomas and Lady Margaret complicated their interactions, adding layers of loyalty and doubt that Anne could not ignore. As the night deepened, the chamber became a crucible of whispered strategies and shared fears. Outside, the court carried on, unaware of the storm gathering in their midst. Anne felt the weight of her choices pressing down, yet within this alliance, a spark of hope flickered, a chance to protect the Queen she revered and the fragile peace of the realm. But trust in the Tudor court was as delicate as the finest lace, and every secret shared was a risk taken. Anne knew that the dagger's shadow loomed still, a silent threat waiting to strike. The coming days would test their courage and cunning, and the fragile bonds they forged tonight might prove the kingdom's salvation or its undoing. As the candle burned low, Anne met Lady Margaret's steady gaze and Sir Thomas's resolute expression. "We begin at dawn," she said, voice steady despite the storm inside her. "For the Queen, for the realm, and for all we hold dear." Outside the chamber door, the distant murmur of the court's intrigues continued, but within those walls, a new force was gathering, a trio bound by loyalty, fear, and the fierce determination to face the darkness threatening to consume them all. The path ahead was uncertain, and the dangers many, but Anne Marwood had chosen her allies. Together, they would face whatever shadows the Tudor court dared to cast. The morning light filtered weakly through the narrow windows of Anne Marwood's chamber, casting pale bars across the worn wooden floor. She sat alone, the folded letter heavy in her hands, its inked words echoing in her mind like a grim refrain. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional creak of the ancient beams overhead and the distant murmur of footsteps in the corridors beyond. The candle beside her flickered, sending shadows dancing across the walls, matching the turmoil that churned within her. Anne's fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the letter again, reading the accusations once more. The words were veiled, but the meaning was unmistakable. Her family, the Marwoods, were under suspicion. Loyal servant or traitor's kin? The question hung in the air, loaded with peril. The careful balance she had tried to maintain between her love for her kin and her sworn allegiance to Queen Elizabeth now threatened to shatter. She pressed her palm to her forehead, seeking to steady the rising tide of anxiety. Her heart ached with a mingling of fear and betrayal, not yet from her family, but from the cruel whispers that now sought to unravel everything she had fought to protect. The court was a place where trust was a currency more precious than gold, yet now it seemed her family's name was becoming a mark of suspicion. The day had barely begun when Anne found herself in the great hall, its vastness swallowing the murmurs of courtiers like a hungry beast. She moved deftly, keeping to the edges, ears straining to catch any mention of her family. It did not take long. In hushed tones behind silk curtains and beneath the carved wooden balconies, courtiers whispered and cast furtive glances toward the Marwood name. Uncertain loyalties, one muttered. A family divided, another added, their words sharp as daggers. Anne's breath caught, her pulse quickening as she felt the walls close in. The stone pillars seemed colder, the chandelier's light harsher. She longed to confront the accusers, to demand their silence, but knew such fury would only deepen suspicion. Instead, she retreated, her mind racing for a plan to protect her family's honor without compromising her own fragile position. Later that afternoon, solace came in the form of Lady Margaret Seymour. They met in a quiet gallery where the scent of lavender lingered faintly among the heavy tapestries. Lady Margaret's silver-streaked hair caught the sunlight, her piercing eyes filled with both concern and resolve. "Anne," she said softly, placing a steady hand on her shoulder, "you carry a heavy burden. But remember, loyalty is not always visible to the eye. The court will test you, but so must you test your own heart." Anne absorbed the counsel, finding a glimmer of hope in the veteran courtier's words. Lady Margaret's experience was a beacon in the murky waters of treachery and suspicion, and though the road ahead was uncertain, she no longer felt quite so alone. Evening brought another visitor, Father Ambrose, who approached in the dim silence of the chapel. The flickering stained glass cast hues of crimson and emerald over the cold stone floor. His aged face was grave, his voice low but urgent as he shared the latest intelligence. The suspicions about the Marwoods were not mere gossip, but part of a wider scheme to destabilize loyal families within the realm. "You must be cautious, Anne," he warned, "for the shadows lengthen, and those who seek to harm the Queen will not hesitate to use any means necessary." The words settled heavily on Anne's shoulders, but beneath the weight, a flame of determination kindled. She would not allow her family's name to be weaponized against the crown, nor would she let fear dictate her actions. The dagger hidden close to her heart was not just a symbol of danger, but of the sacrifices required to protect all she held dear. That night, as the court slept under a blanket of uneasy quiet, Anne lay awake, the letter still clutched in her hand. She thought of her parents, of the whispered doubts that now shadowed their name, and of the path she must walk alone. Tomorrow would demand courage to face not only the intrigues of the court, but the fractures within her own bloodline. For in the Tudor court, loyalty was both a shield and a blade, and Anne Marwood was poised to wield them both. Her resolve solidified with the coming dawn. The dagger, once a secret burden, now became a symbol of the fierce loyalty that would guide her through the coming storm. The court was a maze of shadows and whispers, but Anne was determined to navigate its dangers, even if it meant standing against her own family for the survival of the realm. And so, with the fragile light of morning casting long shadows across the stone floors, Anne rose ready to face a family divided and a kingdom on the brink. The question was no longer if she could protect the Queen, but how much she was willing to sacrifice to do so. The game of power had many players, and Anne Marwood was learning, with every heartbeat, that trust was the most perilous of all. As the first rays of sun pierced the heavy curtains, Anne's eyes narrowed with steely determination. The court would soon see that beneath her composed exterior beat the heart of a woman unyielding in her loyalty and fierce in her courage, a heart prepared to face whatever betrayals lay ahead. The night had wrapped the Tudor court in a heavy cloak of silence, broken only by the distant murmur of guards and the occasional creak of ancient stone walls settling into darkness. Anne Marwood moved with careful steps through the labyrinthine passages of the palace, each footfall muffled by the thick tapestries that lined the corridors. A torch flickered against the damp stone, sending wavering shadows that danced like ghosts along the walls. Her heart beat steadily, but beneath that steady rhythm lay a tempest of nerves. The dagger hidden close beneath her gown, a cold reminder of the peril she bore, pressed lightly against her side. She wished it were not so, yet the weight of her secret was inseparable from her resolve. Ahead, the chapel awaited a sanctuary both sacred and secret. Father Ambrose, the Queen's confessor and a man whispered about in court circles as much for his piety as for his shadowy connections, had agreed to see her. The very idea of confiding in a cleric, especially one who trafficked in whispers as much as prayers, gnawed at Anne's conscience. But desperation had a way of bending principles, and she needed answers that no other courtier could provide. The heavy oak door to the chapel creaked softly as Anne pushed it open, stepping inside. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and incense, mingling in a heady perfume that soothed and unsettled in equal measure. Candles flickered in iron sconces, casting a gentle glow over the stone altar and the narrow, stained glass windows that caught the moonlight outside. In the stillness, Father Ambrose stood waiting, a figure clad in simple black robes, his face both wary and alert. "You come at a perilous hour, Mistress Marwood," he said quietly, his voice low but steady. Anne inclined her head, masking the trimmer in her hands. "There is no time for caution when the Queen's life is at stake, Father." He gestured toward the confessional booth, its latticework door ajar like an invitation and a warning. "Then let us speak in trust." Inside the small, enclosed space, Anne's breath came in shallow whispers. She spoke cautiously, veiling her questions beneath the guise of confession, probing for any hint of the conspiracies swirling just beyond sight. Father Ambrose listened, his keen eyes narrowing as he pieced together fragments of intelligence from her words and the unspoken fears she carried. "There are whispers of a new alliance," he murmured after a pause, "one that binds discontented nobles with foreign emissaries. A poison brewed in shadows, aimed at the heart of the realm." Anne's fingers clenched the fabric of her gown. "The dagger. It is not just a token of rebellion, but a blade meant to sever the crown's hold." Father Ambrose nodded grimly. "Indeed. The web tightens, and those who wield it are cunning. You must be careful whom you trust, Anne. The court is rife with eyes and ears." The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. She felt the dagger again, cold and unyielding, a symbol of the peril that had become her burden. Emerging from the confessional, Anne took a moment to steady herself in the quiet of the chapel nave. The moonlight poured through the stained glass, painting the floor with shards of crimson and sapphire. Outside, the world was still, but she knew the calm was false. Danger lurked in every shadow. As she made her way back through the corridors, the faintest rustle caught her attention. Turning swiftly, she caught a glimpse of a figure cloaked and unseen vanishing into the darkness. A chill ran down her spine. Her secret meeting had not gone unnoticed. The stakes had just grown higher. Back in her chambers, Anne sat by the window, the dagger resting beside her as she pondered the revelations. Father Ambrose's intelligence was vital, but it had come at a price. Trust was a fragile thing in the Tudor court, and every alliance carried the risk of betrayal. Would she be able to navigate the treacherous waters ahead? Could she protect the Queen and keep her own secret safe? The night deepened, and with it, the shadows of doubt and danger. Outside, the palace slept, unaware that the fate of the realm rested in the hands of a young lady in waiting who dared to hold a blade meant for the crown. The coming days would test Anne's courage and cunning as never before. And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, She knew her role in the deadly game was far from over. The dagger's shadow loomed large, and Anne Marwood was caught in its deadly embrace. The great hall shimmered under the glow of countless candles, their flames flickering like restless spirits in the heavy Tudor air. Anne Marwood stood near a marble column, her eyes scanning the crowd with a careful detachment that belied the turmoil tightening her chest. The court was alive with murmurs, half-heard tidings, and whispered suspicions that clung to the tapestry walls and echoed beneath the intricate wooden beams. Here every glance was a cipher, every smile a potential dagger. Tonight, more than ever, Anne felt the weight of the dagger hidden beneath her skirts, its cold steel a constant reminder of the peril she bore. Lady Cecily Howard drifted through the throng like a shadow with a purpose, her eyes sharp as a hawk's, glinting with the thrill of the hunt. Cecily's reputation as a cunning courtier was well earned, her allegiance to Lord Edmund Grey known only to a select few. She had the rare gift of feigning innocence, even as she planted seeds of doubt with poisonous precision. Anne's gaze met Cecily's for a fleeting moment, a challenge wrapped in silk and guile, and though her face remained composed, a shiver traced her spine. The evening had begun with the customary fanfare, lutes strumming softly in the corner, ladies in gowns of shimmering brocade, and nobles exchanging pleasantries laced with hidden meanings. Anne had managed to blend into this tableau with practiced ease, but the subtle shifts in the room's atmosphere betrayed the undercurrents of danger. She noticed how courtiers edged away from some, leaned toward others with conspiratorial whispers, and how Lady Cecily's smile grew sharper with each passing moment. Anne's thoughts were interrupted by a light touch on her sleeve. She turned to find Lady Margaret Seymour, whose silver-streaked hair caught the candlelight like a halo. Margaret's eyes, piercing and knowing, conveyed urgency without a word. "Keep your wits about you, Anne," Margaret murmured, her voice low. Lady Cecily's webs grow ever tighter. "You must be careful not to entangle yourself in them." Anne nodded, the mentor's warning sinking deep into her bones. Margaret's counsel had become a lifeline since Anna's arrival, a steady beacon amid the shifting tides of courtly intrigue. As the evening stretched on, Anne found herself drawn into a circle of nobles discussing the latest rumors from the continent. The Queen's health, foreign alliances, and whispered plots were the currency of conversation. Lady Cecily approached with the grace of a cat stalking her prey. Her voice honeyed as she addressed the group. "One wonders," Cecily said, glancing pointedly at Anne, "how such a young lady manages to garner the Queen's favor so swiftly. Some might say it is not without assistance." A hush descended. Eyes lingered on Anne, some curious, others calculating. The insinuation hung in the air like a blade poised to strike. Anne's heart quickened, but her voice was steady. "I serve with loyalty and honor, as any would in Her Majesty's presence." Margaret subtly stepped closer, her gaze flickering towards Cecily. Sir Thomas Wycliffe, standing nearby, tensed, his hand resting near the hilt of his sword. The unspoken message was clear. The game had shifted into a more dangerous realm. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of the Queen's chambers, Anne confided in Margaret. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across their faces as Margaret's voice lowered to a whisper. "You must be more guarded, Anne. Cecily's ambitions are deep-rooted. She will probe for weaknesses. Trust is a luxury we cannot afford tonight." Outside the chambers, Sir Thomas moved with silent purpose. In the dim corridors, he confronted a courtier whose furtive glances had drawn suspicion. The clink of steel was brief but resolute, a reminder that protection often came at a cost. Returning to the hall, Anne found herself cornered near the tapestry-lined walls by Lady Cecily. The courtesan's smile was polite, yet the veiled threat was unmistakable. "You play a dangerous game, Anne," Cecily said softly, her voice a silk-wrapped blade. "One misstep, and the Queen may find herself betrayed by those she holds closest." Anne met her eyes evenly, concealing the storm within. "Loyalty is a virtue not so easily shaken, Lady Cecily." The delicate dance of words and glances continued, each woman testing the other's resolve. Anne understood that survival depended not just on courage but on cunning, on the ability to turn suspicion into advantage without revealing her hidden truth. As the night deepened, Anne's thoughts raced. The dagger she guarded was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of the fragile balance of power and trust that sustained the Tudor court. Lady Cecily's maneuvers were a stark reminder that danger lurked behind every smile and beneath every pledge of loyalty. Yet Anne was no longer the naive girl who had arrived weeks before. Each whispered threat, each calculated look had steeled her resolve. She would protect the Queen with every breath, outwit those who sought to unravel the realm, and carry her secret through the storm. The spy's game had begun in earnest, and Anne Marwood was determined to play it to the end no matter the cost. The candle flickered once more, as shadows lengthened and the court's intrigue deepened, leaving Anne poised on the knife's edge of fate, ready for whatever dawn might bring. The candlelight flickered against the polished oak panels of the Queen's chambers, casting long shadows that danced like restless spirits. Anne Marwood lingered just beyond the heavy velvet curtain, her breath held as she strained to catch the fragile threads of conversation. The voices were low, urgent, and carried a weight that made her heart sink. Sir Thomas Wyclif's broad figure stood close to Lady Margaret Seymour, his usual stern expression softened by something Anne had never before witnessed, a vulnerability that unsettled her more than any threat from Lord Grey's conspirators. Lady Margaret's silver-streaked hair caught the light in a halo that belied the sharpness in her piercing eyes. Their words were careful, measured, but the tension between them was palpable. "You must not let this," Lady Margaret began, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "This feeling cloud your judgment, Thomas. The Queen needs unwavering loyalty, not divided hearts." Sir Thomas's reply was barely a whisper. "I serve the Queen with all my heart, Margaret. But it is hard to separate what the heart demands from what honor dictates." Anne's chest tightened. She wanted to step forward, to demand clarity, but instead she retreated silently, the weight of their fragile bond pressing heavily upon her. Could she rely on these two, bound by duty yet torn by desire, when every decision could mean life or death? Days later, the tension within the court grew thicker, suffocating like a dense fog. At a council meeting held in the Grand Hall, Lady Cecily Howard's sharp voice sliced through the murmurs. Her eyes gleamed with calculated malice as she spoke. "It has come to my attention that certain individuals within the Queen's household harbor secrets that threaten her safety. Such duplicity cannot be tolerated." A hush fell, all eyes darting nervously. Anne's pulse thundered in her ears as glances flickered her way, accusations unspoken but understood. Lady Cecily's relentless ambition was no secret, and Anne had the sinking certainty that this was only the beginning of a storm aimed directly at her. Later that evening, Anne found Sir Thomas in the dim corridors, the stone walls echoing their hurried footsteps. "You must be careful," she urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lady Cecily's intrigues grow bolder. If suspicion falls on me, the dagger's secret will be lost forever." He met her gaze steadily, though the conflict within was evident. "I will protect you, Anne, but my duty to the Queen comes first. If your secret endangers her, I must act accordingly. And what of your heart?" Anne challenged softly, the question hanging between them like a fragile thread. Sir Thomas hesitated, the weight of impossible choices pressing upon him. When the realm is at stake, personal desires must be set aside. Meanwhile, in her solar, Lady Margaret sat alone, quill trembling in hand as she penned a letter whose contents she dared not speak aloud. Her heart ached with the pain of divided loyalties, torn between her unwavering service to Queen Elizabeth and the tender, dangerous feelings blossoming for Sir Thomas. Each word was a struggle, each sentence a sacrifice. Outside, the court whispered and watched, alliances shifting like the flickering candlelight. Anne knew that trust, once fractured, was not easily mended. The bonds that had held her fragile fellowship together were tested and strained. threatening to snap under the weight of secrets and desires. As the chapter closed, Anne gazed out toward the darkening horizon beyond the palace walls, the dagger's shadow looming ever larger. The stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was uncertain. Would loyalty endure when hearts wavered? Could she hold together the fragile threads of alliance before they unraveled completely? The night deepened, and in the silence, the court waited with bated breath for the next move in a deadly game where every bond was a potential betrayal. And every choice could tip the scales toward ruin or salvation.